We'll see if this works this time. All right. Don't know what it was. Yeah, already here. All right. Audio coming through and it choppy. What do we got? What do we got, team? Let me know if we're choppy. Yes, we did it. Thanks for your patience. All right, team, 1 second. All right, let's start from scratch. Sun totally up in Barbados. It's in Barbados. We're in Barbados. 1 hour ahead of you all now, so extra sun. And I checked on Bitcoin's birthday, 14 years strong, running. All that's left to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. There we go. Excellent. So here I am. We're in Barbados. I've been coming here since I ran away from New York City in COVID times, and it turned out this was one of the only islands that stayed open really late in the autumn season. And once Canada got super crazy, once I saw Canada implementing the controls at the point of sale for essential items and non-essential items. So what they did in Canada in 2020 was that even if you went to the pharmacy, you know how you got toys and everything at the pharmacy. Well, they blocked those sections off or changed the codes on the scanners so things that weren't essential couldn't even be bought in those stores, so it wouldn't give people an excuse to go. So once I saw that, I said, I got to get out of here. And Barbados, being an island, you know, you can never compare places in COVID. It's always a dumb idea because everywhere is so different. But COVID, you know, islands had a major advantage, right? They can be shut down, and they did that here. But after I arrived, so once I was here, I was kind of stuck. So my kids did a lot of growing up here, and so we got a good situation. We like it. It's a nice place, and you get to do some. You know, they don't really have a lot of taxes here, so that's the other reason why a lot of people like it. They're like, I make a joke, you know, capital gains tax. What that, right? What's that? They don't know. Converted most of my shitcoins into Bitcoin today. Very good, Indemnity. Excellent. That's always fun. So we have a fun episode. A couple of housekeeping items. The studio that you're seeing here is simply because I couldn't get my stuff out of storage. I left a lot of my stuff here last year, so I've got a computer here. I've got all kinds of stuff. I got a child coming in to view who wants to say hello. She snuck out of her little shower with her mummy. They're on their way. Sweetie, you got to go to see mummy again.
I want to see you.
Yeah, I know, sweetie, but I'm busy. I'm going to see you again later, okay? I don't know how you snuck out. Mummy's not paying attention.
Mama didn't pay attention.
Yeah, I know Mama didn't pay attention. Love you, sweetie. Go see her. So, I thought I could get it out yesterday. Things were, you know, yesterday was the New Year's holiday here, so couldn't get the computer out. So tomorrow you'll get the new setup. Today, just wanted to cover and meet with you. I miss all you guys. You know, I miss everyone here. It's been fun. You know, I feel in the mornings when I don't do the show that I have all this energy and nowhere to put it. So had to do it today. Had to do it. Just 1 second. All right. Thanks, team. Daughter is, we love the kids, but they're making noise. Decoy. Yeah. Yeah, we do decoys. Don't worry. We do. All right. So where were we? So did you see the thing that everyone's talking about? The thing that everyone's arguing about today is Lex Friedman's reading list. Believe it or not, you know, it's slow news days, but it's got everyone up in arms. And for reasons I don't really understand. Now, the list does look a little high school reading for some people. I think I read a lot of those books in high school. Not all of them. There's some that I haven't read because I don't want to read. The first book I ever, some are even younger, like when I was younger, The Old Man and the Sea, one of his books, is the first book I ever read in my life. I think I was 9, like top, front to back, and the adult version. I'd read some Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, but they were like kid versions of the books, which I didn't understand until I read them later. I thought I had read Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, but I hadn't. I read Old Man and the Sea because I thought it would, like impress my parents or something. And it was, it's a short book. It's like 100 pages. So, it's one of them. But, and Little Prince as well. I think most of us read that as children. Frankenstein. Anyway, the list is actually great. I don't have a problem with it. The funny thing is all the reactions, right? Everyone reacting to this book, this list, and oh my God, how is he so stupid? And one of the craziest reactions was from Nassim Taleb, who we've, of course, canceled in Bitcoin, or canceled is, I guess, the wrong word. We've understood the limitations of his own brain for years now. Unfortunately, he was one of the people who we all really admired in the early days because the idea of anti-fragility, he did make certain contributions to the world of thinking and all that stuff. The idea of anti-fragility, black swan, these were all really innovative things, but I had a pretty good view into his meltdown. And part of the meltdown happened, he wrote the foreword to Saifedean's Bitcoin Standard originally. Now, because Bitcoin Standard did so well, it looks like it caused him to have a broken brain, right? Like ego, all this ego stuff. So I interviewed Saifedean for CoinDesk on the day of the halving, so 2020 halving. And I did a show just on Bitcoin that day because we had managed to, one of these dart throwing exercises. I've thrown 2 amazing darts when it comes to event production in my life. I threw the dart in 2017 to do a consensus event for CoinDesk right after Thanksgiving 2017. And if you remember, Thanksgiving 2017 was like the biggest weekend in the history of Bitcoin and crypto at the time, and everyone talking about it. It was the biggest news, and every Thanksgiving table in America and all kinds of people. And when we got back, so I had thought of doing the event that summer. We planned the event, we did it, and luckily our execution was perfectly timed because when the weekend was over, our event opened up, and one of the headlines we got from one of the fake news outlets was Bitcoin hits $10,000, packed conference parties into the night. It's pretty hard to beat that kind of a reaction. So I threw a dart and I hit the $10,000. I had a feeling Thanksgiving was going to be a big weekend and all that. But I threw a dart again at the start of COVID. And I said, I think the halving, and having cycles, dates, targeting them is not easy because it changes based on how long each block took. And if some of them can take 10 minutes, whatever seconds, some can take 9 minutes, whatever seconds. So even some are much faster, some are much longer. So gauging and timing events on Bitcoin's blockchain is an inexact science. But sometimes you just gotta go with your gut and go with your instinct. And so in 2020, I actually threw the dart the year before. I threw the dart because we had to pick one. It was still a physical event. I said, okay, we're going to be able to do it on this week, and I think if we get lucky, I said this will be the halving, and we'll get it. The date never changed. COVID came, and we had to make the event digital. But I still said, let's keep the dates because I think we're going to get it. Now there was predictions even then, 3 months out, that it would not be till June. And way further out than it actually became. But as we led up to it, the hash rate increased so much that the blocks were coming quicker and quicker, and days started getting lopped off. And suddenly, my event was perfectly timed for the halving. And I had Nick Carter at the time, was still sort of coming up. He was sort of well known, but he hadn't really hit his stride. I had a bunch of people on the show. It was great. We called it Plan B. It was just about Bitcoin. And Saifedean was on there, and I asked him about his fight with Taleb. And right away he said, well, he'll either come around or he'll just lose his mind. He wasn't sure, right? And that surprised. I said, well, I don't understand that. I thought they would, sort of work it out, and everyone still had a really strong impression about Talib at the time, before he went on his meltdown and worked for Bitcoin Satoshi's vision or whatever the hell he did, all the crazy stuff that came after, right? Getting paid to go on stage. So he had probably the most idiotic take on the Lex Fridman book list. And what he said was, so he went out and said, like, the reason I never want to do this guy's interview is because he's such a moron. Because, Lex Fridman, of course, has these long interviews, and he asks people regularly if they want to be a guest. And Talib took the occasion to say, he's asked me 9 times. And he's such an idiot. Look at his book list. That's the reason why I never went and did it, right? And then Jordan Peterson jumps in. I have rarely read a response to good faith requests this thoughtless. Lex Fridman is an excellent and careful interviewer. And what exactly is it about his reading list that earned your derision? And Nassim Talib tells Jordan Peterson, you idiot, stay out of this. It's pretty good. You got to admit that Talib, for all of his faults, is still funny when he engages the arrogance. We got to hand him that. But what we're seeing is these egos coming out, even Peterson, of course, right? We can't deny that Peterson, you hear him regularly go on about narcissism and what a problem it is, especially when he's talking about anons on Twitter, where it looks like he's kind of missed the mark. Even though I have some sympathy for what he's saying, you can not use your name, be synonymous, and still adhere, I think, to his standards of what being not anonymous would mean, as in, you're a real account. You have conversations. You're not a 1-follower account with no profile pic and a name that can just be taken away. Therefore, you can insult anyone. So I still think there is nuance to what Jordan Peterson is saying, and there's a reason why you'd want to listen to it. But stop for a second and ask yourself, thinking of Jordan Peterson and, calling people narcissists, for example, who between Jordan Peterson and his huge amount of followers and his huge amount of critics, who amongst them would be less of a narcissist than him? I think, now by narcissist, I don't mean he's got all the psychological hang-ups of a typical narcissist who has no self-awareness. But, the suits, the pontificating, right? We're fans, right? We're fans of Jordan Peterson to a certain extent. We're fans, right? We see some value in the way he's helping people, so we can't deny he's here to do good. And I don't know him to be a liar in any case, right? He's never lied publicly in a way that I've noticed. I don't think he's ever done anything in a way that would make me think of him as a selfish type of narcissist. But nevertheless, I think his impression of himself is really strong, and I'm pretty sure he sees himself as the smart one who isn't afflicted by all this narcissism and doesn't have as big of an ego problem, maybe in his own mind, as someone else. Or maybe he does. I'm not a huge consumer of Jordan Peterson content at all. But the point is ego, right? When you hear this kind of fight between Nassim Talib, Jordan Peterson, talking about Lex Fridman, even Lex himself, right? And there's nothing wrong. Everyone has an ego. I have an ego. Egos are a big part of what is going on in the world. But when you start putting ego into the context of how we deal with our problems and how we talk about them and how we interpret the world, I saw a really interesting thread. Now, I watched a Tom Cruise movie on the airplane down here. The new Top Gun movie was great. Loved it. Thought everything about it was great. And you can really see his talent. And again, we've talked about it on this show before. Go back and watch the Tom Cruise videos when they made him sound like he was crazy because he was fighting pharmaceutical industries and talking about mental health and talking about physical fitness. And 20 years ago, they made him out to sound like he was a crazy person. And he's having a real sort of renaissance right now because of the success of Top Gun Maverick and his diligence in his profession and really his gratefulness to the audience. He did that great thank you note around Christmas time. But One movie in particular that he recorded years ago around Christmas time, or is a Christmas movie, they're saying, gained a lot of attention in the past few weeks, and everyone talking about it. That's Eyes Wide Shut, the Stanley Kubrick film. So on the tip of everyone's tongue right now, seems to be popping up all over the place. I see everyone discussing it on Twitter. I've seen lots of YouTube shorts and videos and reflections made on it recently. Now categorizing that movie, Eyes Wide Shut, as a Christmas movie. Maybe that's why it's in the environment. But here's a note from a guy named Lomez on Twitter. That's L0M3Z, the way he spells the handle, but it just says Lomez for the name. So here's what he says, or maybe she, but not sure. Watched Eyes Wide Shut again, and hidden meaning was finally revealed to me. It's not about pedo lizard elite, but tragedy of self-important, presumptuous doctor. I repeat myself. Living penny ante life with penny ante stakes, getting humiliated and mobbed by men of actual power. Age-old tale of insecure wife guy coming to realization of his own insignificance, midlife crisis triggered by envy, boredom, translated into coping and seething in paranoia of greater men. Had always thought of Crew's character as noir light man who knew too much. But he is in fact a huge dork. Finally noticed all the times he flashes his doctor credentials to get people to do him favors. Laugh my ass off. He believes he is owed access to people's secrets and true wealth. This is obscured by Cruz, the actor, being true Chad and peak Nicole for wife. But this only implies the tragedy of his circumstances and psychology. The impotent striving. He is a servant of the rich and powerful. A servant. The doctor mindset does not allow for this. He is a glorified whore to these people. He is no better, less expendable than their other playthings. It is a movie of shattered ego, getting raped by these men in the same manner as their junkie prostitutes, all unwitting props in their elaborate game. Really, am I supposed to be scandalized by rich guys having prosty bacchanal? It is maybe depraved or weird in some sense, or try-hard Klaus Schwab-style NWO LARPing, but only takes on such a sinister and mysterious cast viewed through naive eyes of striver doctor. Cruz embodies the conspiranoid failure mode, glorifying elite self-image by buying into the LARP, while simultaneously revealing his own lowly, naive, and diminished self-image, who can only make sense of the world through paranoid fantasy. So that's what I wanted to say. The paranoid fantasy part, and this idea of the doctor and ego. You know, I spent a lot of my holidays with my brother-in-law, who is a sort of famous doctor in Canada. He finally made the New York Times recently. I was teasing him, not for good reasons, over the holidays. You know, you really get a sense, just what I know about the world and spending so much off time with a really highly regarded doctor in Canada. Made me realize right away just how stupid some of these people are. I've always known how stupid they can be about certain things. And he's a smart person, like IQ, brain power, you know, top. Hard to beat even. Even in general awareness and general knowledge, really strong. But when it comes to actual critical thinking and all the other stuff, the ego part is so large that being able to really understand most things around you becomes impossible for him, right? He can either see it in a way that reaffirms all the institutions that are around us, right? He's always citing reports that he's reading and studies that he reads because he reads all these studies and stays on top of everything and believes he's capable, right? Because of the ego, believes he's capable of understanding all of these studies, right? It's typical, you know, the old Michael Crichton saying, wet streets cause rain, right? Wet streets cause rain. You know, this is a guy who literally tried to tell me that he was certain over the holidays, certain that we are all going to have the no beef diet, right? We have to have no beef because of what it's doing to the environment. I don't even argue, right? I'm just like, well, that might be a psyop, right? It might be a psyop. You know, you might be mistaken that that this is the case. You know, I asked him to tell me if he's eating carrots, like how many rabbits did they have to kill to keep the carrots, right? Like, When you're living off of vegetables, you got to kill everything in the ground. You got to kill everything on the ground. You got to kill everything in the air. You got to put a fence around everything, and that'll kill more. And I live on a farm. I know what kind of killing goes on between a beef farm, which is zero killing because the cows can take care of themselves, and the fences are not big enough to obstruct anything but the cows getting out. Right? They're not really made to stop wolves from getting in, or coyotes or anything like that. Anything can get in, but can a coyote kill a cow? I don't think so. I've never seen that in my whole life. Right? What dangers do the cows have other than getting out of the farm and going on the road and getting hit by a car? That's it. That's the only danger I can think of, where I live anyway. And we got tons of cows. But I know the vegetable farm guys, or even anyone who's farming anything of value. You get a lot of marijuana farmers now in the area because they made it all legal in Vermont, but forced a lot of domestic consumption on the local folks, so they can't import it from everywhere. So all of a sudden, a lot of these cannabis farms are going up. But what do you think happens there? You know how much killing has to go on to have a cannabis farm? Do you know how much? It's crazy. You got to kill all day, right? It's in the middle of cornfields. All the beasts want it, so you got to get to it, right? And you can't put it indoors, right? They don't have the kind of facilities indoors to do it there. Anyway, the point is, ego, right? Ego is one of the biggest obstacles to anyone being able to understand what's going on in the medical field, what's going on in the financial field. And that's why it's so important that Bitcoiners have that slogan, stay humble, right? Stay humble. The stay humble part is not an insignificant part of what it is that we're doing, because ego is such a blinder, especially in the credentialist world that we live in, especially in the fiat world that only recognizes credentials as a means to get closer to the money printer and therefore closer to the action. And you can see that ego piece and the ability to understand the world around us, even from this other thing that's got everyone talking from 60 Minutes 2 nights ago, which was the Paul Ehrlich, the guy, the big Malthusian guy. So if you guys didn't see it on 60 Minutes, 60 Minutes is a big American Sunday evening news show, and it lasts 1 hour. That's why they call it 60 Minutes. And it always happens when the football games end. So if you guys are unaware of American sports culture and how sports television is broadcast and how television culture in general is staged or framed in America. So this is just a quick summary of the football culture. So in America, all the high schools play on a Friday night. They all play Friday night after school, games, cheerleaders, everything you can imagine. Saturday is for colleges. So all the games happen on Saturday for the colleges. Every college plays. They all travel. They spend a whole week. There's only, in the game of American football, you play one game a week. The game is too difficult. There's too much strategy. It's not played like a European soccer game every 2 or 3 days. It's 1 day a week. So Friday, high school, Saturday, colleges. Sunday is the professional league. They play all day, every team again. There's one Monday night game and there's one, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about the details. Just remember, the vast majority of games are played on the Sunday, and there's one late game, but there's a break between games, and that break usually happens between 7 and 9. And 7 and 9, the same people who are watching TV all day sort of keep it on and watch 60 Minutes, and it's been that way for 50 years now. This show is as old as television, and used to be really respected. 60 Minutes used to be the biggest deal. It has since become one of the bigger jokes in US television and one of the fakest news outlets in the world. And again, it's probably, just reading on what's going on here, probably just a bunch of ego-filled people who don't know when they're wrong, going on about things they've been wrong about many times before and not facing up to them. So you had Scott Pelley. Scott Pelley is one of the interviewers there, and he had this Paul Ehrlich guy. And they were talking again about the Malthusian dilemma, right? Too many people on Earth. We need a cull. We need people dead. It's just too much. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? This and that, right? So Paul Ehrlich, first of all, just to know about him, this is Ben Shapiro on him, right? This person is one of the most famous wrong people ever, and they're still interviewing him with his catastrophic Malthusian predictions. Talking about his book, The End of Affluence, That was in 1974, and he wrote, "Before 1985, mankind will enter a genuine age of scarcity." Here's Nick Carter. Seeing that Paul Ulrich is trending, if his predictions alarm you, just simply look through his prior ones, like the population bomb in '68 or his commodities bet with Simon in 1990. So he made a bet in 1980 about the price of commodities. They picked a basket of commodities. He said, we're entering a world of scarcity. The other fellow said, no way, superabundance. All these commodities are going to go way down in price. Ulrich was wrong. I'm not sure if he ever paid his debt, but he never acknowledges these things. So he's been wrong for about 50 years now, and almost 60, right? Almost 60. We're now that it's 2003, we're 60 years from 2023. We're 60 years from the first turning of the fourth turning phase, which is the death of Kennedy in 1964. Unfortunately, in the last fourth turning 80-year cycle of history, the first one, the golden age, was the shortest. It got cut short because of the death of Kennedy, which is a real bummer. But the good news is we're 60 years from the beginning of the second era, which means we're on schedule to change soon, right? We're on schedule. 2024 to 2028 is the turning. So we're right into it right now. So when I say ego, right? When I say ego is the main issue here, you get a guy like Scott Pelley who probably thinks he's right about all this stuff, and a guy like Paul Ulrich who's like 90 years old right now, right? And has never had to face up with being wrong ever once in his whole life. It's just always the same thing, right? He gets to be wrong. He doesn't have to pay a price. Now, remember that Scott Pelley is the same guy who interviewed Mike Cernovich in the fallout of the 2016 election. And that should have been the end of his career as a journalist, by the way, because what he did there was so dastardly that you should never take him seriously ever again. So this is what happened. He brought Mike Cernovich on to 60 Minutes to talk about fake news in the run-up to and aftermath of the 2016 election. So at this point, Trump's already won, but he hasn't been sworn in, and they're running all of these shows on what happened, and they're trying to make sense of it, or what happened, right? Because none of them had ever met a Trump voter in their lives, right? So they just couldn't make sense of it. So they brought Cernovich on. And what they said was Cernovich was the great purveyor of fake news in 2016 because he covered the Hillary Clinton collapse at 9/11. If you guys don't remember, Hillary Clinton went to the 9/11 memorial on 9/11 in New York City, and a camera caught her falling and aides picking her up to put her back on the limo or whatever it is, the driver. And he ran stories saying she's really unwell. Why aren't we talking about this? What is exactly wrong with her? Is she healthy? And so they use that as one of the examples of him purveying fake news because he'd created a lot of content around it. So they had him on 60 Minutes, and Scott Pelley did the interview. And Scott Pelley said to him, well, how did you know that you had no proof that she was sick? You just were out there creating news stories and fake news and all this stuff. So they ran with that on the actual show. But Cernovich was smart enough to have his own recording, the raw footage of what happened. And this is what they edited out. So this is why Scott Pelley should have been, just dismissed from then on, right? No one should ever have paid another minute to him, because this is someone who clearly their brain was broken by whatever happened in 2016 and were not coming to grips with it. And therefore were no longer a reliable source of information. So what happened was they spent their time creating this narrative in the show about Cernovich being the great purveyor of fake news. But when you saw the full video, the description between that part of the Hillary Clinton 9/11 collapse was way more offensive and made Scott Pelley look like a complete moron, because this is what he did. He said, well, how did you know she was sick, right? How did you know any of that stuff? And Mike Cernovich said, well, I didn't know. I saw her collapse and I wanted to know more. It's her health thing, right? And he goes, but we knew she wasn't. And he goes, well, how did you know that? Right. This is what they cut out. And Scott Pelley says, well, the campaign told us. So Cernovich goes, the campaign told you, but you're an idiot. That's not journalism. You can't believe what the politicians tell you. That's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to just say, well, they told me, they gave me a talking point and an excuse. I'm good. File it under solved. Right? File that one under solved. And when Cernovich pointed that out, you could see the brain breaking on Scott Pelley's face. You can see him physically, he couldn't hide it, right? You see his brain like, oh shit, what did I just say? I'm an idiot. And therefore they could never have put it in the show. It would have been, you know, like dunking on your one of your best journalists. It's like saying this guy is an idiot and therefore you shouldn't listen to him. So they had to hide that part. But anyone who had a brain went and saw the real video and saw his brain break live. And if you see the brain break live, as I said, you don't need to give him any more attention. But together, those pieces, you know, you take this Paul Elric guy and you take Scott Pelley, and you start to see that ego and people's egos, and think again in terms of Eyes Wide Shut, right? It wasn't a story, according to this reviewer, about the Epstein pedo elite, Klaus Schwab, what's going on. It wasn't someone going in and discovering all that stuff. It was an idiot doctor who thought himself so clever and so above all of that stuff that he was an easy target for people with actual power over persuasion, power over a person, right, to get them to do something. And that is the story of Eyes Wide Shut, right? So as many people see the movie, many people do see the movie as this peek behind the curtain about elites, whereas it really is about this guy who just isn't as great as he thinks he is, and it's just another doctor, and doctors are dumb too, and they only learn a few things, and what they learn ends up being really easy to hypnotize them because there's a whole ego trip with it, right? Doctors have a whole ego trip that comes with their position and salary. Did you guys know that banks across America have to have a special division just to deal with doctors as clients because they're so bad with money? Did you know that? Did you know that doctors are some of the worst people with money in America? They can't manage money at all. They never learned any of that stuff. And the problem is they think that because they're doctors, they're also good at managing money, but that's not how this stuff works at all, right? You get some hyper specialized skills. It doesn't mean they transfer to another field at all. And doctors are just completely unaware of that, again, because of ego. That's why the doctor was such an important character to use in the Eyes Wide Shut film, right? And so think about that for a second. Scott Pelley, the ego problem, the academic Paul Elric, the ego problem, Scott Pelley, the ego problem, right? And now think about what Cernovich is out there doing these days, right? So Cernovich is out there often these days losing followers because he's talking about vaccines and how people are getting distracted by vaccine talk because of all the heart health going on with young men. So everyone talking about the vaccine documentary died suddenly, right? So Cernovich, and I'll do the same, I don't know anything about the vaccines. They look dangerous, but I don't know anything about them, right? And I don't care about the vaccines, really. They're not something that I spend a lot of time on and worry about too much. And I understand other people might be worrying about them, so I'm also not trying to stop that. But what Cernovich is spending all his time talking about now is it has nothing to do with vaccines. Men's hearts have had trouble for a long time. And he's been talking about how he's one of the only people that does his blood work regularly, and he sees most men never getting an EKG to find out if they have any weird genetic defects in their heart, how healthy people do always die suddenly because not a lot of men, especially men, are sensitive to their heart health and understand what needs to be done in order to closely monitor it and all these things. So his whole thing is that now that everyone's talking about young men in particular dying of heart trouble, that there is this whole other world causing that he has known about for a long time. So again, take that summary that I just mentioned about the story for Eyes Wide Shut, and remember it was a doctor, right? And the ego thing kept him from being able to see what was really going on. And he believed in all of this, oh, I'm exposing an elite sex club, and that's why they're wearing all these clothes, and it's a pedo thing, and the whole Eyes Wide Shut story that everyone is attracted to and wants to see when they watch it, right? They don't want to see the story of a idiot doctor who's getting abused and used. They want to see I get information about what's going on behind the curtain with the elites and what's going on here and what's their sex stuff and da 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 da. So, that distinction is really what Cerno is honing in on here, right? People, if they do get caught up in this, have to use the paranoid conspiracy lens. Now, I'm not an anti-conspiracy theory at all, a person, right? So a lot of them, we talk about JFK here, we talk about, we're not saying the world is as presented, right? But this is what we're saying. If you are telling me that a Klaus Schwab and the WEF and the people who make the vaccines all have this plan together to limit the human population, like that's the plan, right? Now, I think they're okay with the human population going down individually, but if there's someone telling me that these people are so sophisticated that they can plan this to the extent that some people are worried they're planning it, I'm not there. That's this ego thing, right? Because what I see, and I'll give you the exact example right now. I'm going to give you the exact example of how what could be conspiracies work, but what I see going on with the Epstein case and Biden and how we can think of it in terms of super smart Klaus Schwab type people, right? I just don't think the model is useful because what we're actually dealing with are just petty, stupid criminals. And once we open our eyes to it, our ideas of their power and potential come right down. But here's what we're dealing with, right? And I think this is everything we need to know about what's going on in the world today. So remember the last episode, one of the last episodes I had here, I mentioned how the US Virgin Islands were opening up, the Attorney General was opening up a lawsuit against JP Morgan because they were the financial purveyors of Epstein's crimes. And of course, Epstein's Island was in US Virgin Islands. So that's where they got their jurisdictional mandate and they applied US law and sued JP Morgan. This happened last week, right? So they initiated proceedings against JP Morgan for facilitating the Epstein crimes and covering them up, okay? So what happened? Well, this is where we get into, it's not conspiracy theory, this is the petty criminal nature of the bullies and small-time crooks that are running our system, right? Here, this is what happens. So this is from Jordan Schachtel. So Jordan Schachtel will be at Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th. I've been communicating with him, trying to get as many independent journalists, as many independent thinkers as I can. So here's the story he's covering. He just published this, right? On December 27th, U.S. Virgin Islands Attorney General Denise George filed a major lawsuit against JP Morgan in a Manhattan federal court, alleging the banking behemoth helped to facilitate Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking enterprise on the island through which she has jurisdiction. The local St. Thomas Source newspaper reported his primary residence was Little St. James, his private island off St. James, where for years he trafficked in girls and young men and ran young women and ran a complex web of shell companies registered in the USVI that enabled his crimes. The court documents allege. But that same day, I don't know if you knew this, the same day that this woman did all that stuff, Joe Biden got on an airplane. Where did he go? Right? Well, he went there. He went to the US Virgin Islands. So it was for his vacation, right? And it was not planned in advance. All of a sudden, he just shows up there. On New Year's Eve, perhaps the perfect time to sneak out a story, the Virgin Islands Democrat governor, Albert Bryan, released a short statement announcing that he had swiftly removed the AG from her role. I relieved Denise George of her duties as Attorney General this weekend. I thank her for her service to the people of the territory during the last 4 years as Attorney General and wish her the best in her future endeavors. Oh, that's nice. Despite many media inquiries, Bryan has yet to explain why he fired the prosecutor on New Year's Eve. There are no public reports of a physical meeting between Biden and Bryan. No reported. However, when Biden arrived in St. Croix, the Democrat governor publicly pitched the president, so he's asking for money on social media. I really hope it brings light to, so he's talking about energy needs money, give me money, energy crisis, renewable, blah, blah, blah. Under the new governor's watch, the Virgin Islands has become a black hole for billions of dollars in federal funds, reports the Taxpayer Alliance. The federal government appears to have plenty of leverage for a request from the USVI. David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Advocacy Group, has described the territory as completely reliant on federal handouts. President Biden is no amateur when it comes to firing prosecutors. When he was serving as VP of the Obama administration, he infamously forced out the Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating his family's business enterprises. In November, under the now fired AG, Epstein state settled with the USVI government and paid out $105 million in cash, and half of the proceeds from the sale of the Epstein Island. Through this lawsuit and settlement, the Attorney General's office, acting on behalf of the government, is using its authority to enforce the laws of the Virgin Islands against criminal enterprises and to protect public safety, read a statement from the AG's office back in November. In the lawsuit she filed against JP Morgan, the AG claimed that her investigation revealed JP Morgan knowingly, negligently, and unlawfully provided and pulled the levers through which recruiters and victims were paid and was indispensable in the operation and concealment of the Epstein trafficking enterprise. So, what did I read there? What I read was the way small-time crooks go about their business, right? This is a small-time crook who's in a position of power. But these are not sophisticated people working on decades-long maneuvers in order to herd humanity into one corral. There may be people behind the money, right? I believe that. There is a layer I haven't seen yet. I've seen a lot. I've been to, in the office with prime ministers and presidents, and I've met these people, and I've worked at that level. I've heard military briefings where only top secret people were allowed into the room, and real troop movements and deployments. I've seen that stuff in my own life, and so I've seen up to that level. I've seen the Davos people. I've seen it. Beyond that, I still believe there is something to do with the money and the bankers, going back to the origins of the Federal Reserve and the bank cartel that was created then, right? So there is a layer that we don't see. I understand a bit about these people, billionaires who don't need the actual ego attention, and those are the ones you have to worry about, right? The ego ones, the ones who don't have the ego, are the ones you need to worry about, right? The ones who have the ego, right? They're either worried about conspiracy, a bunch of people working against them, and they're so coordinated, or they are blinded by their own knowledge and belief in their understanding of the world, right? So if you put those two pieces together, the good news for us in Bitcoin, right? The good news for us in Bitcoin is that we do have this mantra of staying humble. We don't have this need to understand every detail of even the Epstein case, even what's going on with the media, right? We understand now that it's simply because the money itself is poisoned. And because the money is poisoned, because we can't measure the money, we can't manage anything related to money. Nothing, right? Nothing that we are unable to measure can actually be managed. We cannot measure our money. We cannot manage our state because we can't measure our money. We can't measure it. And that's how you end up getting these results, right? So how deep does the conspiracy go, right? I think all of that Klaus Schwab stuff, eyes wide shut, can be put under the whole file of ego, and we can just focus on getting rid of the bank cartels and dealing with the small-time criminals who are in positions of power like Joe Biden. But this is not a power that is so wicked and evil that we can't understand it, right? He's a pervert who has some problems, and we're going to catch him. I think it goes back to LBJ. I think it goes back to the time where LBJ took over the country. As we've seen, the minute LBJ took over the country, We got the Bank Secrecy Act, all those things that came from 1964 that were really about monitoring money, keeping cash around the world, understanding who was getting paid. All of it came from the mind of LBJ, who understood if anyone looked into his finances like that, it would be a problem. So it had to happen that anyone who was talking about what he was doing needed to be tracked, followed, understood. And from there, we have the origins of FATF and all the real enemies of the world we're trying to create, right? The Bitcoin standard world. So as we look out today, right, as Bitcoiners look out, the good news is we're still on our worldview, right? All these other Paul Ehrlich guys, right? All these other guys, their ego doesn't allow them to see that all of their ideas are garbage. Scott Pelley, right? All the people that need credentialism, all the people that need to say they went to Harvard, they're a doctor, they're this, they're that, and somehow that means they can understand and explain any problem under the sun, right? It's not the case. Bitcoiners understand that the one thing we know is that people love money, and if you follow the money, and if you understand what money is doing to influence people, you're going to get a completely different take on the world. And because we followed the money, we've seen what the money has created. We've seen the incentive systems. We've seen the world that money has created, and we've rejected it. And we said, we can do better. We can do better. And that's not an ego thing. That's people collectively saying, this collection of people are at the end of their road. We need to do something better for our own survival, really, because we can't continue on in the system. It's depleted. Entropy is set into the fiat system to such an extent that there's no returns anymore on that system, either spiritual or personal. It's all ego. It's all manufactured at this point, right? Manufactured consent to keep this system going. And once we realize that it's not geniuses that are playing 5D generational chess, right? It's a bunch of small-time criminals who are one step ahead because of the money, one step ahead. They're one beat ahead playing the conductor's wand, right? They're just one beat ahead. And that one beat has been the gap between understanding money and not understanding money. And now that people are waking up to money itself, all these other things are going to fall into place. So as we head into 2023, right, we have to be diligent about what's going on. We don't want to take our eye off the Epstein case. We certainly don't want to take our eye off of vaccines and what could happen and who knows, right? But these are not our pressing issues, right? Our pressing issues are much simpler. They're staying humble, stacking sats, because soon, the time is coming soon, when our own capacity as not psyoped, not misanthropic, not beaten down, not fearful, right? Just plain old Bitcoin holders. There's going to be a time where that energy that we have maintained, that we've kept within us, that we haven't expended on worrying about this and being afraid of that and being afraid of being poor and all these other things, right? Because we have a simple worldview, it takes very little adjustment to stay on track. And we're on track, right? This is the world we predicted as Bitcoiners 10 years ago. And we're here, right? We're here. We're in the world we predicted. And as I saw Dan Held tweeted out this morning, right? Bitcoin is more likely, I mean this mathematically, literally everything. Bitcoin is more likely to hit $100,000 this year than zero. That's just true, right? Doesn't mean it's going to do either. But what are the preponderances, right? What are the possibilities? Well, the possibility of 100K is much greater than the possibility of zero. It's just not even close, right? It's not even close. So the good news is 2023, right? Still on our timeline. Bitcoiners still authoring the future, still authoring where we're headed, and haven't had to adjust our worldview at all, right? And indeed, it is the Proof of Keys Day, right? It is our, if you celebrate today, it's a good day to take some off of an exchange, take some off of a thing, right? And that's all we need to do, right? It's a stay humble, stack sats kind of message today. All right, let me go through some of these comments. And Dimnity, I'm confused by Peterson's move to the Daily Wire, Conservative Inc. Yeah, again, Daily Wire, I'm a fan in a sense, but I'll never deny that it is a talking point machine, right? So they're really just trying to feed you talking points in order to debate things that you probably wouldn't have debated unless someone told you to debate them, right? So they are definitely a psy-op. It's a little strong. They're definitely interested in enragement engagement, I guess is a better way of saying it, right? And you know, you got to worry about, you know, it's the Ted Cruz situation, right? And it's the same as the environmentalists. Are the environmentalists gonna hope for the world to solve global warming? Well, of course not. They're out of a job, right? There's no job if they do that. And just like Ted Cruz, great debater, but he doesn't want to run out of things to complain about that get him campaign money. You don't want to actually solve the problems, right? You can't solve the problems. If you solve the problems, you got to get a new job. The same people who are in the race business, right? Do they want to solve? Does Al Sharpton really want to solve racism? Well, if there was no more racism, no one would invite Al Sharpton anywhere. He needs it. He needs it. And you know, it's a bit of the same thing. And I guess here's one other way to frame Daily Wire. Daily Wire is more useful as a talking point machine when they're just talking about when they're talking about the major global issues. Then I can rely on them. But when it's a slow news week and they're going into like, oh, look what a drag queen thing did, you know, get angry, da, 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 da. You know, I'm a little less there for that. No, I'm not out there saying you shouldn't criticize storytime drag queen stuff. If you want to, you go ahead, right? You go ahead. But the problem gets much larger when everyone's screaming and crying about it, right? Don't forget, people want to annoy the other side. There's a war going on, and all these people who are getting pumped full of talking points. It's like a sport, right? They're just arguing over which football team they like, and so I find Daily Wire can be a little bit like sports media, I guess is what I'm trying to say, like Homer sports media, right? So there you go, Homer sport, like going for the home team. I'm seeing more start to cater. Maybe they see the shift; they're securing their future income now. Yeah. Yeah, that's Dex. That's what I'm saying too. Very possible. Yeah, great story about brother-in-law. This is from Brandon. Brandon Gentil. Fortunately, I was able to orange pill 2 of my 3 brothers-in-law this Christmas after a couple of hours talking. We're winning, but so early. Yeah. Joe Valdez. I spent $100 Swan Bitcoin gifts to my kids. I need to try something different. There you go. You have 30 days to accept my Bitcoin gift. They have 30. Good. Yeah. Proof of keys. Take it off. Yeah. I like the Grimes interview on Lex Friedman. I didn't see that one. To hell with Held, by the way. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, he's not original. No, I agree. But what I will say about Dan Held, because I've spent enough time with him, I worked with him at Kraken, and I totally get what people are saying. For sure, it's not my style, right? Because he's always telling me what to do, right? You know what I mean? Like, you got to do this, you'll get more views and all that. So I understand what you mean. But it's a simple message, Dan Held, and he repeats it, and you gotta appreciate the dedication and consistency, right? So, and he's got his own ideas on how things should work out, and you know, so yeah, he's not a person that I've ever followed or took any direction from, but you know, he throws about 10 shots up at the net. And I'll say when he hits one, you know, I've seen some infographics he's created over the years. They're excellent, right? So he takes a lot of shots. Some of them are boring, but he can score goals, you know. And I think all Bitcoiners, you know, there's a way he helps Bitcoin, and therefore he'll always get a pass for me, as far as I can tell, you know, unless he does something really bad. But I haven't seen that, right? Steve Paris, I love that Sailor has been dropping Stay Humble and Stack Sacks often lately. Yeah, in pretty much every interview. A good show today. Thanks, Steve. Thanks. Stay authentic. This is the way. You're right, Bitcoin Graffiti. Yeah, and you know, honestly, that's why I you know, I try to do the show every day, and I don't worry too much about production quality, because if I did, it would lose some authenticity. But thanks for sticking with me through the bad quality sound screen. Tomorrow I should have the screen, my computer back. We should be seeing the actual studio take form. It's gonna be a few months here. I'll be back on the farm in Vermont probably by April. We'll see. There's some things happening. There you go. This is the best show, man. Yeah, thanks, Bitcoin Graffiti. We love it. Thanks, guys. All right, team. I've kept you for a little longer today. Peace. See you tomorrow morning. We're back in full swing every day now, every day. Holidays are over. Time to get to